I came back from my business trip earlier than expected, deciding not to tell anyone I was returning. I wanted to surprise my husband, Ethan, with my early arrival. As I turned onto our street in Seattle, I noticed several cars parked in front of our house. The front yard was decorated with blue and pink balloons, and a banner stretched across the porch read, "Welcome, our little miracle." My heart skipped a beat. Something big was happening. I parked my car a block away and walked over, curiosity buzzing in my chest. The front door was slightly ajar, and the sounds of music and laughter spilled out. I stepped inside, and the scene in the living room stopped me cold. Jessica, my best friend since college, stood in the center of the room, visibly 6 months pregnant. My mother-in-law, Margaret, was gently rubbing Jessica's belly with a warm smile, while my mom, Linda, passed around drinks to the guests. A table in the corner was piled high with gifts wrapped in pastel paper, and a sign above it read, "Baby shower." My Aunt Clara asked, "So, is the nursery ready yet?" Jessica beamed, her hand resting on her bump. "Almost. Ethan insisted on painting it himself. He's been working on it every weekend." At that moment, Ethan walked in, carrying a tray of drinks. He approached Jessica, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and placed his hands on her belly. "We just need to set up the crib," he said. "We picked it out together last week." I stood frozen, my blood turning to ice. My mom spotted me first, her face paling as she hurried over. "Sophie, we weren't expecting you today," she whispered, grabbing my arm. "Let's go outside, we need to talk." I yanked my arm away, my voice trembling with rage. "Talk about what?" "About how my husband got my best friend pregnant while I was working overseas." The chatter in the room died instantly. Jessica noticed me next, her face draining of color. Ethan stood motionless, his hands still on her belly, his eyes wide with shock. "Sophie," he started, but I cut him off, my voice sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare. How long have you been cheating on me?" No one answered. My dad, Robert, stood in the corner, unable to meet my gaze. Jessica took a shaky step forward. "We didn't want you to find out like this," she said, her voice small. I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, really? And how were you planning to tell me? After the baby was born? Or maybe when they turned 18? My mother-in-law stepped in, her tone pleading. "Sophie, please, think about the baby. Jessica doesn't need this stress in her condition." I turned to her, my eyes blazing. "Her condition? The same condition I was in 2 years ago when I lost my baby? Where was your concern then, Margaret?" The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom tried again, her voice soft. "Honey, I know this is difficult." "Difficult for whom?" I snapped. "For me, who worked nonstop for 9 months while my husband was sleeping with my best friend. Or for all of you, who had to keep up this charade." Ethan finally stepped away from Jessica, his voice low. "Sophie, can we talk privately? Don't make a scene." I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. "A scene? No, Ethan, a scene would be telling everyone how you convinced me to take that overseas job, saying we needed the money to start our family." I turned to Jessica, my voice dripping with venom. "Did he tell you that? Or did he say he was lonely and abandoned while his cruel wife chased her career?" Jessica burst into tears, her hands trembling. "It wasn't like that. We didn't plan this." "Of course not," I sneered. "I suppose you just tripped and fell pregnant by my husband. These things happen, right?" The guests shifted uncomfortably, some grabbing their bags to leave. My dad finally spoke up, his voice strained. "Sophie, calm down. You're upset." "Upset?" I shot back. "No, Dad, I'm perfectly calm. In fact, I'm grateful." My mom frowned, confused. "Grateful?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Because now I see everyone for who they really are. My husband, the liar. My best friend, the traitor. And my family, the cowards who chose to protect this lie instead of me." I walked over to the gift table, grabbed a random package, and held it up. "This one's yours, Mom. You bought a nice gift for your son-in-law's mistress's baby." "Sophie, please," my mom pleaded, tears in her eyes. I tore the wrapping paper open, revealing a white baby outfit with blue details. "How thoughtful," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I hope you kept the receipt. Ethan stepped forward, trying to take the gift from my hands. Enough, Sophie. You're making a fool of yourself. I yanked it away, glaring at him. Making a fool of myself? No, Ethan, you did that all on your own, getting my best friend pregnant while I was paying all the bills. My mother-in-law stood up, her face red with outrage. This is too much. Ethan was just looking for the happiness you couldn't give him, always busy, always working. I turned to her, my voice cold. You're right, Margaret. I was too busy working to pay the mortgage on the house where your son was sleeping with my friend. I looked around the room, every familiar face now a stranger. You know what? You can keep the house, the furniture, the gifts. But Ethan, I suggest you get a good job, because you won't have access to my money anymore. He turned pale, his voice shaking. What are you talking about? I'm talking about how, while I was overseas, I wasn't just working, I was also consulting a lawyer. I have proof of every penny I spent on this house, on you, on our marriage. I turned and walked out, my hands trembling, my breathing erratic, but I refused to break down in front of them. They didn't deserve my tears. I ignored the curious stares from the neighbors, who had likely heard every word of the confrontation, and got into my car, slamming the door shut. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my vision blurred with unshed tears, but I refused to cry. I started the engine and drove, no destination in mind, just away from that nightmare. My phone buzzed incessantly, missed calls from my mom, texts from Ethan, even Jessica. Please, Sophie, we need to talk. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. You don't understand the whole situation. Oh, I understood perfectly. I understood that while I was working to support our home, our marriage, they were together. I understood that every time Ethan called to say he missed me, it was a lie. I understood that every time Jessica said she was too busy to talk, she was busy with him. A bitter taste filled my mouth, disgust at them, and at myself for not seeing it sooner. After driving aimlessly for a while, I pulled into the parking lot of a random hotel. I needed a place to breathe. I wasn't going back to that house, a monument to my humiliation. I walked to the front desk and booked a room for a few days. The receptionist gave me a strange look, probably noticing my disheveled appearance, but handed me the key without a word. Once inside, I locked the door, collapsed onto the bed, and finally let the tears fall. I curled up, hugging myself as waves of rage, disgust, and suffocating pain crashed over me. But I couldn't stay like this forever. I had to do something. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer's office. He already had all the necessary documents prepared, having been informed of my situation months ago. I want to start the process today, I said firmly. Divorce, property division, everything. And I want it clear that Ethan won't see a single cent of my money. He nodded. You have more than enough evidence to contest any claim he might make. The house is in your name, and all the expenses were covered by you. He has no rights to anything. I took a deep breath, a small sense of relief washing over me. Good. Let him find out the hard way. I left the office feeling a flicker of control for the first time in a long time. Days passed, but the calls and messages didn't stop. One afternoon, while I was having coffee at a cafe near the hotel, Ethan approached my table. He looked awful, deep bags under his eyes, messy hair, but I felt no sympathy. Sophie, please, he said, sitting across from me uninvited. I didn't want you to find out like that. I crossed my arms. Oh, but how did you want me to find out? With an invitation to the baby shower? He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. This isn't how I wanted things to happen. I made a mistake. I let out a bitter laugh. A mistake? Getting my best friend pregnant was a mistake? No, Ethan, it was a choice. You chose to sleep with her. You chose to lie to me. You chose to let everyone cover for you. He lowered his head. I was lonely, Sophie. You were never here, always traveling, always busy with work. I scoffed. And why was I busy, Ethan? Because I was the one paying for our damn house while you sat at home doing nothing. He said nothing, his silence confirming his guilt. You want to know the most ironic part? I continued. I took that job because I thought we were building something together. I made sacrifices thinking it was for our future. But while I was working myself to exhaustion, you were screwing my best friend. He looked at me, desperate. I know I messed up, Sophie, but can't we fix this another way? I leaned forward, staring into his eyes. We're fixing it. My lawyer has already filed for divorce. You won't get a cent from me. And as for that child, I hope you're a good father, because I want you out of my life. I stood up and walked away, leaving him sitting there, defeated. It didn't take long for the news to spread. My real friends, the ones who hadn't betrayed me, stood by my side, offering support. My family, on the other hand, tried to justify their actions. My mom called repeatedly, saying, "We didn't want to hurt you, sweetheart. It was complicated for all of us. You need to forgive." Forgive? No. I moved on. I left the hotel, bought a new apartment, and focused on my career and my future. Ethan, meanwhile, quickly realized life wasn't so easy without the comfort I'd provided. A few weeks later, he texted me, "Can we talk? I miss you." I laughed, deleted the message, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. When I received confirmation that Ethan had been officially served with the divorce papers, I knew his real nightmare was just beginning. He tried to contact me relentlessly, dozens of calls a day, endless messages, even showing up at places he knew I'd be. I ignored him, refusing to let him manipulate me. One night, as I returned to my apartment, I found my mom waiting outside. "Sophie, we need to talk," she said, her tone urgent. I rolled my eyes, already knowing what this was about. "We have nothing to talk about." She pressed on, "Ethan is desperate. You're taking everything from him." I crossed my arms, my voice cold. "Oh, now he's the victim? He cheated on me, got my best friend pregnant, and all of you covered for them. And now you're telling me I'm being cruel?" She sighed, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. "What you're doing to him isn't right, Sophie." Anger burned in my chest. "You want to talk about what's right? Was it right for me to pay the mortgage alone while he was screwing my best friend? Was it right that I worked my ass off while he played the perfect husband? Now he gets to deal with the consequences." She looked at me like I was a monster. "He has nowhere to go." I shrugged. "Not my problem." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I didn't raise you to be this way. And I didn't expect my own mother to take the side of a cheating bastard." I shot back, turning and walking into my building without looking back. Ethan's situation only worsened. Since I'd been the one paying for everything, he was now drowning in bills. The mortgage payments on the house were overdue, and without my income, he spiraled into financial ruin. Then came the eviction. I knew it was coming, and when I received confirmation that he'd failed to make any payments, I made sure to be there to witness the moment he was forced out of my house. When I arrived, the scene was chaotic, boxes scattered across the front yard, Ethan arguing with the officer handling the eviction, Jessica standing beside him, clutching her pregnant belly, her face pale with panic. "Sophie!" Ethan shouted when he saw me. "You can't do this to me." I crossed my arms, a dark sense of satisfaction blooming inside me. "I can, and I did." "This isn't fair," he yelled. "I lived in this house." "No," I corrected him, my voice steady. "I paid for this house. You were just a parasite living in it." His face turned red with frustration. "Where the hell do you expect me to go?" I shrugged. "Not my problem." Jessica looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Sophie, please." I took a step toward her, my voice icy. "Oh, so now you can say my name?" Before, it was just, I hope she never finds out, wasn't it? She lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "But it is," I said. "And now you and Ethan have to deal with it." Ethan ran his hands over his face, his voice breaking. "You just want to see me destroyed, don't you?" I leaned in closer, meeting his gaze without a trace of pity. "Yes." He clenched his jaw, grabbed a box, and slammed it onto the ground in frustration. "You don't have a heart." I tilted my head, a faint smile on my lips. "Funny, because you sure loved that heart when it was paying all your bills." He opened his mouth to argue, but shut it again. The officer approached. "Time's up. You need to vacate the property now." Ethan's expression turned to sheer panic as he realized he was out of options. He grabbed another box and stormed off, Jessica trailing behind him. I stood there, watching him leave, broke, homeless, and powerless. In the following days, my entire family turned against me. My aunts called, my mom showed up at my apartment again, and even my dad, who usually stayed out of things, tried to intervene. "Sophie, he's sleeping on your mother-in-law's couch," he said. "Don't you think this has gone too far?" "No, Dad, I don't," I replied. "Jessica is pregnant. They have nothing." "Great," I said. "Then Ethan can finally do what he should have done a long time ago, get a job." My mom threw her hands up, exasperated. "You're obsessed with revenge. And you're obsessed with protecting a cheater," I shot back. They couldn't change my mind. Ethan was in ruins, no home, no comfort, no access to the money he'd leached off me for years. I heard through mutual friends that he'd started taking odd jobs to make ends meet, but it wasn't enough. Then, the inevitable happened. Ethan showed up at my apartment, looking miserable, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. "Sophie, please," he begged. "I have nothing left. I need help." I stared at him, my voice cold. "Like I needed help when I found out you were cheating on me?" He closed his eyes, frustrated. "I was an idiot, I know that, but I can't change the past." I crossed my arms. "No, but you sure as hell can suffer in the present." His hands clenched into fists as he swallowed his pride. "You don't have to be this cruel." "Oh, but I do," I said. "I learned from the best." I slammed the door in his face, a sense of peace washing over me. Time passed, and just as I'd predicted, Ethan sank even deeper. No home, no money, no comfort. He'd gone from a spoiled, dependent husband to a desperate man hopping from job to job just to survive. Then I heard the best news I'd received in months. Jessica filed for divorce. I found out through an acquaintance who ran into me at a cafe. She hesitated, then smiled slightly before dropping the bombshell. "She left him," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Jessica. She filed for divorce, and she wants alimony." I burst into laughter, a loud, genuine laugh that came straight from my gut. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," she replied. "Ethan can't hold a stable job, and she doesn't want to be the one supporting him." The irony was delicious. Jessica, the woman who'd sworn Ethan was her one true love, the one who'd clung to him while I paid for everything, had now done to him exactly what he'd done to me, left him when he was no longer useful. "And she wants alimony?" I asked, still grinning. "Yeah," my acquaintance said, smirking. "She claims he promised to take care of her, and now that she has a baby, she needs financial support." I couldn't stop laughing. "Please tell me, does Ethan even have money to pay her?" "No," she said, and I lost it. Ethan hadn't just lost everything I'd given him. Now even the woman he'd betrayed me for was financially screwing him over. Karma had come for him, and this time, he had no one left to leech off. I had to see it for myself. The following week, I accidentally showed up at a rundown bar we used to go to, one of the only places Ethan could still afford. He was sitting at the counter, a ghost of his former self, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, his beard unkempt, a cheap beer in his hand. I walked in slowly, sat 2 seats away, and ordered a drink. He noticed me immediately, his face tightening. "What do you want?" he muttered, his voice rough. "Nothing," I said, sipping my drink. "Just enjoying the view." He sighed heavily. "Are you happy now?" I took another sip, savoring the moment. "Yes, very." He scoffed, shaking his head. "You think this is funny, Sophie?" "I think this is hilarious," I said, my voice calm. "You threw our marriage away for Jessica, and look at you now. She left you. She took whatever little you had left." He went quiet for a long moment, staring at his empty glass. "She said she couldn't be with someone who had nothing to offer," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Funny, right? That's exactly what you said about me." I tilted my head, a faint smile on my lips. "You don't get it, Ethan." "Oh, but I do," I said. "You were only good enough for her when you were convenient. Now that you can't provide the comfortable life she wanted, she threw you away like garbage." He didn't argue. He couldn't. I stood up, ready to leave. You know what's the best part? You deserve every bit of this. I walked out, leaving him to drown in his misery. After that day, I cut off everyone connected to my past. I distanced myself from my family, the hypocritical aunts who kept telling me to forgive, my mom who insisted I'd gone too far. I owed nothing to any of them. The only person I owed something to was myself. I started over, rebuilding my life from scratch. I sold everything that reminded me of that pathetic chapter, donated some things, burned others. Ethan and Jessica were erased. I went out more, met new people, and enjoyed life without carrying dead weight on my back. For the first time in years, my life was mine. Months later, I heard that Ethan had tried to appeal the divorce ruling, claiming he deserved alimony. The judge laughed in his face and denied everything. I also learned that Jessica kept draining whatever little money he had left, her alimony demands relentless. As for me, I'd never felt better. The world was finally as it should be, I was free, and Ethan was getting exactly what he deserved. I moved forward, my heart lighter than it had been in years, knowing I'd reclaimed my life while he paid the price for his betrayal.